We will call this meeting to order. We'll start with the roll call, please.
Meeting called to order at 9:01 a.m. Directors Osborne, Dwyer, Directors Osborne, Dwyer, Veerkamp, Anzini, and Day present. Director Day is participating via teleconference as noted on page 3 of today's agenda. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk of the Board Sullivan present.
All right, we will stand to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a moment of silence for peace on earth? Thank you. All right, we're here to adopt the agenda. Any board member have any objections?
We'll get it.
Okay, it's been motioned by
Second.
and seconded by Director Veerkamp to adopt the agenda. Are there any members of the public who have comments regarding this?
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is a public comment period for the adoption of today's agenda. Director Anzini, it does not appear at this time there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 5? Director Day, just remember to unmute. You need to do the *6 on your telephone keypad to speak. Just give him 1 second here. *6, Director Day on your telephone keypad. For the adoption, we do have Director Day participating. However, it appears we are having some technical difficulty on his end, so we will call him absent for the vote and move on.
Okay.
How do you vote Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, and 4, voting aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to communication.
Good morning. For employee recognition, I have one today. You can look up on our website and see some of the pictures. We received a note from David Zielinski, president of the Placerville Fire Safe Council, regarding our participation in Get Prepared for Wildfire Season. We were there sharing information of what we've done, and Dan Corcoran was there. Great pictures, smiley face, welcoming people, and talking about what we do in emergencies and what we've done in fire management or forest management. So David writes, "I'm very grateful for EID being there and supporting the event." So Dan, thank you very much for your participation there. That
Thank
concludes the recognition.
Thank you. A comment, Director Dwyer?
Yes, I'd just like to add, as an executive member of the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council, of which the Placerville Council is one of 26 community councils, that we really appreciate the partnership that we have with EID and the projects that we do, attempting to link them all together to protect our entire community. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. It's always good to have the recognition and the public awareness, and I look forward to seeing it come down the hill a little bit. All right. Thank you. Now we move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to discuss or ask questions regarding anything that's not on the agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. Director Anzini, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on today's open public comment period.
Thank you. We'll move on to communications on the agenda. General Manager.
I have one. I'd just like to share with the public that we've scheduled a special board meeting on August 11th at 1 o'clock to issue the bonds. Yeah, I'm sorry, April, geez, I have August here. Time's flying. April 11th at 1 o'clock. We've accelerated that from the 25th meeting because the interest rates are going up, so we're having a special board meeting for the board to consider that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any item or any board of directors want to make a report? Director Osborne.
Just a little memory. We have the Special Districts magazine, and there was an article about the importance of the incident command system. The incident command system was born from the fire siege in 1970. Yes, we had a fire siege, and I was a young fire captain and was involved with developing the incident command system. I've used it personally on floods, chemical spills, you name it. It's just a management system, and but the interesting thing was there was a lot of resistance from the fire service itself. And we always said that the fire service had 150 years of success uninterrupted by progress. And so but it took a lot of time, and it was really into the 90s when Governor Wilson mandated it, or the cities and counties were not going to get any money from the state unless they adopted the incident command system. And so it's been very successful. Just a thought.
Thank you very much. Yes, Director Veerkamp.
Yeah, I'd like to thank staff as well as Jim and Dan and Brian for working diligently on the Camino Safety Project, and I think pretty much we've got that hopefully put to bed now, and on to getting the roundabout done and getting that project wrapped up with the county and Caltrans. Thank you very much. The weekly calls hopefully now will go away for us. Thank you.
All right. Director Dwyer, anything to report? Okay. Director Day.
No, thank you, and hopefully you can hear me now. I was button challenged, pressing the wrong button. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I have nothing to report.
But for the record, Director Day has been present since roll call, and he did hear the whole meeting. He just was not able to vote due to
Technical difficulties on the
wrong
other.
button pushing.
Yes, that happens to all of us. Okay, we'll move on to approve the consent calendar. Any items on the consent calendar do board members want to pull to discuss? All right,
I'll move we approve the consent calendar as presented.
okay, Director Day,
Second.
and it's seconded by Director Osborne to approve the consent calendar. Ready for the vote?
Public comment for
Yes.
any items on today's consent calendar. Director Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's consent calendar. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote Division 1,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
All right. Now we'll move on to public hearing.
We will open the public hearing at 9:11 a.m.
This is regarding division boundaries, and our general counsel will be making the presentation.
Good morning, board members and members of the public participating today. I'm Brian Polson, I'm General Counsel. We're just taking a second to get everything up and rolling. I feel sort of like maybe I should start this off like a boxing match, you know, like, and now, the moment you've all been waiting for. It seems like it's been a long time coming, but I'm happy that we are where we are today, which is to present to the board final draft map alternatives for the board to select and adopt a final district division map. So just a quick recap here. We've met, as I indicated, a number of times, as is reflected in this slide, to consider this information, including holding a public hearing during the last board meeting to get board and public input as is required by the Elections Code. Next slide, please. And next slide. So as just a quick reminder for the public, this is a short background here. The 2020 federal census required the district to adjust its division boundaries so that they comply with federal and state law to ensure that each of the division boundaries is proportional in population and does not impose restrictions or impediments on the citizens' ability to vote and be adequately represented. The deadline, as a result of a number of delays, has been established by statute, emergency statute, to April 17th, 2022. And so we bring, can I adjust to the next slide? Thank you. And so we are here today to consider and adopt a final map, division map. This is a reflection of the district's current division boundaries. We've shown this on a number of occasions. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to present the final 4 draft map alternatives. And I'm going to do that in the public GIS portal that we've established for the public to engage with us. So if we could switch views here very briefly. And one thing you might have noticed as you prepared or reviewed the board packet materials in advance is that the 4 draft map alternatives that I'm going to present today are very, very similar. They are all iterations of one of the previous maps that the board considered and provided feedback on. We called that map 1A, and so the iterations of 1A that you're going to review today, we've called 1B, 1C, and 1D. What I'm going to do today is point out, direct your attention to how these various maps differ and why, and then following that, I would invite the board to provide any final comments or feedback and hopefully take action to adopt a map. So this is draft alternative map 1A. You might recall that this version of the redistricting map was largely developed following some public input we got from former EID Director Greg Prada. He had a number of suggestions that we utilized to form the basis of what is essentially map 1A with some minor changes to smooth out population within divisions. This was a map that we've presented to you a number of times, along with several other draft maps, which were substantially different than this one. But it was obvious that the input that we got from both the board and the public was a strong preference for this version of the district's map. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pull up the dashboard here. The dashboard is a function that we created to show how the populations within each division within each map alternative are reflected. And so this is alternative map 1A. You can see we have a red dash line. That's the target population of 26,441, and the green dashed lines above and below are 1% above and 1% below. These are the targets that we established in order to achieve equal population among the divisions. So jumping back then to the map, now that you've seen 1A, I'm going to switch views to 1B and talk about how 1B is different than 1A. Oops. Wrong button. There we go. Okay, I'm going to switch off 1A now and go to 1B. You can see that I'll just, as a point of reference, for all of the maps, the heavy dashed line is the district's current division boundary, so you can compare the current boundaries to the alternatives. What I'm going to do now is to zoom in a little bit on where map 1B, which is what we're looking at right now, is different than 1A. And it's primarily here in the Shingle Springs and Placerville areas around Highway 50. So what you're looking at here is, this is Shingle Springs, kind of at the lower corner, and under this is North Shingle Road. Under map 1A, North Shingle Road was used as the dividing line. So this road running north and south divided Division 2 in purple from Division 3 in sort of beige. What we've done with map 1B is to move the division line eastward and north of Highway 50 to capture these blocks here. None of these blocks are particularly heavy in population, but they allowed us to incorporate residents here, which are technically in Shingle Springs, into Division 2, which captures all of the other Shingle Springs residents. So the idea, and we discussed this change at the last public hearing, though at that point in time we hadn't yet refined which blocks to include there. So the idea here is you can see that that whereas in 1A, North Shingle Road was the dividing line, and now in 1B we've captured these additional blocks to the north and east. I'll note here that these blocks are currently in Division 2, so one of the added benefits is that it's just fewer changes from our existing division boundaries. Now, to offset that change, since we added several blocks to Division 2, we also we had to add and we added to Division 2 and subtracted from Division 3, so we need to add to Division 3. We did that by extending the boundary, whereas in 1A, the boundary dividing the two divisions was Highway 50 here. And so we've come down, we've brought Division 3 south of 50 down into these blocks that I'm kind of highlighting with the mouse here. Again, none of these blocks have large populations, but it was enough to offset the change that we made over in this area here. This is also somewhat beneficial to this map alternative because these the homes in this area have zip codes that are consistent with the Placerville zip code 95667, which Doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be, in the same division with the other zip codes, but it is one factor that that constitutes what we have referred to many times as a community of interest. So again, it's beneficial, and you can see here that the existing boundary line runs along here. So again, we made this change to essentially keep the division boundaries more like they are today. Okay, that's it. Those are the differences between 1A and 1B. I think it is fair to say either of these maps work. The populations work, and I think it is fair to say, even though you might recall I was a little bit skeptical about this version at our last meeting, I think it is an improvement now that I've actually we've had time to really formulate and methodically adjust the boundaries. So I do think map 1B is an improvement on 1A. But again, either of them work, and there may be some reasons why visually from a mapping standpoint, why some might say, well, I kind of like one better. It uses the highway, as a dividing line rather than, in this case, I believe this is Mother Lode Drive. But both maps, I think, meet our objectives. Now I'm going to quickly go from map 1B to 1C. So if you'll bear with me here. And I'm going to point out how 1C differs from 1B. Again, bear in mind, these are iterations of the same map. So again, I'm going to come here to the Shingle Springs area. A little too far. Okay. So in map 1A, North Shingle was the dividing line. We moved that over in 1B to capture these blocks here right around where the map says number 2. And in this version, map 1C, we've added these blocks right up in this area. Those in 1B were still in Division 3. We did that because, again, you'll notice that this is the current boundary line, the heavy black line. And so all we did here was we just added the remaining blocks that we had left out from our current division boundaries back into Division 2. Again, this means that this map more closely reflects our current division boundary lines here. So we just completed the area there by adding, I think, 2 or 3 blocks. And then again, in same area down here south of 50, we've added these 2 blocks here from Division 2 into Division 3 to offset the population change. So very minor change here. I should also point out there is one more change actually. In this version, as well as in map 1B, there's one block right here in central El Dorado that in map 1A, this block had been moved into Division 1, which is reflected in green here. In maps 1B and 1C, we've moved that block where it says 69, that's the population of that block. We've moved that block back into Division 2, which it is currently in Division 2. So again, this is a reversion to reflect closer to our existing division boundary lines. And the reason we did that, both because it's currently that way, and one of, I think, a beneficial objective here is to make as few changes as possible, so as to affect as few of the district's residents as possible. But you'll notice that, excuse me, that this map is really right in the center of El Dorado. This is where Highway 49 and Pleasant Valley Road come together. And so it just made a lot of sense to keep that block together with the remaining Division 2. Okay?
Poor Reds.
Well, thankfully, Poor Reds was never in dispute. It was always solidly in Division 2. But it does add back in Annabelle's Chocolate Lounge, which is really important, so thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to, I'm not showing you the dashboard populations because they're all very, very similar. I will show it to you on the last one here. I'm going to now go to the last and final division map alternative and just point out how they're different. No changes up here in the northern part, and no changes here in the area south of 50, other than we come over and there are 2 blocks here that were in Division 2 in maps 1A, B, and C, but we've now taken these 2 blocks and added them to Division 3 in 1D. Again, the reason here is that these 2 blocks have Placerville addresses similar to the rest of Division 3, and they're very small population changes. There are some blocks in Division 1 with Placerville zip code 95667, but there was nothing we could do about that. That just that had to be the case. But with this map alternative, we really capture as many of the Placerville zip code addresses into Division 3 while capturing as many of the Shingle Springs zip code and residences in Division 2. So very, very minor change, but it is a meaningful one. And so with that, that is how each of the maps break down. I'll just show you alternative 1D population. And this is how each of the division populations break down for alternative 1D. You can see that Division 2 is very close, but within that 1% margin that we've targeted, as are all of the other divisions in all of the 4 maps that we've shown you today. Arguably, Division 2 has seen significant growth and will likely see growth, as will Division 4 under these proposed divisions. So there's room here in Division 2 for it to grow a little bit over the course of the next 10 years. But again, I'm very pleased with how closely we are achieving the target population for each of the divisions in this particular mapping alternative, as well as all 4 of the alternatives that we're showing to the district today. So Jen, if you will, any questions about how these maps differ before I go back to the PowerPoint presentation?
Nope.
Great.
I think we all checked our addresses to make sure we're still in the district.
Okay. And here we are back at, I can't control it, okay. Jump down to, I think we're probably, there we go. Next slide, please. So that brings us, these are just depictions of the mapping alternatives. It was easier for me to show you the changes by going to the public portal rather than, try and point them out here. So if you'll skip through the next couple of slides, Jen. And next slide, please. Great. So that brings us to the final few slides. Of course, this is our public outreach. We've done really quite. I'm very proud of the outreach that we've done, especially with the online mapping portal. I think that's just been a really tremendous resource. It has really aided us, staff, in receiving and making sense of public input, because we're able to, because folks could give us very precise feedback, and that was very helpful for us in drafting the maps. So once the district has concluded or adopted a final division map, what we would do with this page is to keep it open on the district's webpage, but post the adopted map and take down the interactive, draft map alternatives, since they will be obsolete at that point. And then we will file our all of the redistricting information that we've generated during this process. So I keep trying.
Brian, a question is, how much, I think this is an outstanding effort in the public outreach and the availability of data and the maps and all the hard work that was done to put this all out there. How much public input did we get?
Not a lot. We got a few requests for information. As you all know, Director Prada was actively providing feedback and very helpful. Beyond that, it was really, there wasn't a whole lot. Maybe one or two others off the top of my head, but I can't quite remember off the top of my head.
Thank you.
That was going to be my question, too.
Yeah.
So, any other questions from the board or comments? Okay.
Well, the next
Yeah,
steps
this Director
here
Day.
are
Director Day.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, given that first of all, I want to thank everybody that's put this together. I know that logistically it's a tremendous amount of work, but I'd like to, these iterations mostly seem to affect Director Dwyer and Director Verkamp's districts, and would kind of like to hear if they have any concerns or questions about any of them. I mean, well, I think we all got the email from former Director Prada about 1D. It does make a lot of sense, but I wondered what Director Dwyer and Verkamp, if they had any concerns about that.
Well, I think, this is Pat Dwyer. I think I'd also like to pile on and say to Brian and your staff, tremendous effort. There is no perfect answer, so we're satisficing is what we're doing in terms of decision making. And I think it's a good satisfactory answer. I know the districts are kind of important because we all represent, an elected body. We represent the people in our districts. But I think that this board really has come together to try to represent the entire district and make decisions that are good for the whole of El Dorado Irrigation District, as opposed to trying to battle each other and doing things that are great for this part of the district but not good for the others. So while redistricting is important, and that's a reason for my question, how much public input do we get? It's really the board making good decisions for the whole of the organization.
So Pat, I would concur with that. I think early on, we talked about trying to keep it simple and not make, major changes. I don't think there's a need for major changes, and yet have them to where they could incorporate some growth, which this 1A or 1D both do. 1D makes sense as well because of the zip codes. Now, we all know that you could be clear on Pleasant Valley and still have a Placerville zip code, but I think we're in a good spot. We've got good choices, and without really changing too much, and that's the whole idea that we don't want to get into if we can avoid it. And I think all directors stay pretty whole and for the right reasons, and yet some other areas get put in where they need to be, specifically District 5. So it makes good sense to me. So I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, I'd
Thank
like
you.
to add to that over the years, even if a question from somebody came specifically like Camino Heights, when none of these give me Camino Heights back when I've had them, but if there was a question from somebody that lives in Camino Heights and calls me because they would assume that I would be their representative, I would just go ahead and handle it, and as and let the representative, the district representative, know that I'm monkeying in their field. But I think Pat's statement is exactly right. We try to represent the district as a whole instead of the unique district. Now I represent, and other two representatives represent the ag community, but predominance of the. Oh, I got a spam. It goes through my hearing aids. You guys can't hear it. Anyway, I would just suggest that maybe we narrow it down to 1D and 1A and just see how the feeling of the board is on that. Would that be an appropriate motion?
Well, I'd like to make a couple comments myself.
Okay,
if
sure.
everybody says-
Yeah.
So, one, the public input is the most important thing, and I think everybody in a broad sense, we as board members have to work together, even though we are representing certain district areas. And I can't help but, people need to realize, one, there wasn't a lot of input on this, which is concerning, but I think redistricting burnout is probably that part of this, simply because so many people were, working on the congressional boundary lines and working on the state and the assembly. So when it gets to local, and then of course the Board of Supervisors had to work through theirs. So I call it just redistricting burnout. But the other part is when you have a lack of response or participation, people are basically, okay, you're just going to make a decision and I will have to vote. So as a common voter, I'm going to want to know who's representing me. The other part I have noticed in the last 3 years is people will contact us, including other districts. I don't refer them to other board members, but what I do is I send them to the staff. And the staff has done a really good job for me, because there are other complexities that are always involved with certain constituents. And, for example, my area will probably represent most of the special district area of the wastewater system. It was part of that graph. I think a couple meetings ago when you show who would be representing. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that as a board collectively, we have the opportunity to discuss these things, but in the whole part of this is for the best for all the ratepayers, not just a few. And the other part is the growth part. There is a huge amount of people who have a NIMBY persona, which means they really, really are like their isolation in El Dorado County. And so when I hear somebody says, well, we're moving this because of growth, some of the people who have been here for a long, long time, just like I've seen in Humboldt County and Contra Costa, I've seen it all the time, there's just too much traffic here. Why are you allowing growth? Well, that's not our decision. Our decision is based on what LAFCO does and what the Board of Supervisors do. And I try to explain that, but we clearly have done a really good job on this, since nobody is really coming forward with their concerns. And I think that's the benefit of this, because staff has done a really good job and the public outreach. And even if people aren't responding, that doesn't mean they're unhappy. That means they're fine with it. And from that point, I understand that we need to make a decision today, and I
do have just a couple more things I
good.
wanted to address. In terms of public feedback, we did, since the last board meeting, we were contacted by the County Elections Department, and they asked for shapefile. They wanted to kind of dive in and look at our maps, and once we provided those, they did give us some feedback and a request. The request was to, the feedback was that there were about 18 blocks that were not consistent with the Elections Department's precinct boundaries. And I'm not quite sure why that is. I think it's because the precinct boundaries, the blocks change with each census. And they asked if we could adjust our division, our boundary lines to coincide with the precinct lines for the obvious benefit to the Elections Department, which is it means that they, it creates a lot less of a burden when they have to send out, make voting, determinations and tallying votes and so forth. The difficulty was, especially so late in the game for us, and I had to unfortunately communicate this to them, is that all we have are the blocks are the building blocks. Those are they define the populations, And so splitting blocks is a virtual impossibility this late in the game for us, because there's no way for us to calculate the populations in a half a block or a quarter of a block or whatever it is. So thankfully, there were only, as I said, about 18 of those blocks. So I think, we are out of 4,000 or some odd blocks. So we are substantially similar to the precinct lines, but and this happens, I think, with every redistricting, and I'm sure it's a bit of a headache for the elections department. But unfortunately, there just wasn't really anything we could do this late in the game. So I did want to disclose that, since you did ask about feedback, and one of the next steps here will be that the board will adopt a resolution, which we've prepared and attached to today's agenda item. And once the board has adopted that resolution, staff would make, final sort of, I'll just call them cleanup, technical corrections to the lines without changing any of the division boundaries, and then we would send that final map to the elections department. So that would be our next steps today.
Okay.
And then my final comment, and I didn't include this, Jen, you could go to the next slide if you would. So here we are to the board options, and I have not made a recommendation for a map because I think that all of the maps are so similar. Any one of them would achieve our stated goals. But I will say that I view the iterations of map 1A as improving upon themselves. And so I think it is fair to say that 1D reflects, it reflects the most out of what we are trying to achieve with parity among populations within the divisions, with maintaining the continuity of the communities of interest. It's not that different than any of the others, and so I didn't feel the need to recommend that over any of the others, because, as I said, there are some benefits to some of the others. But I do think that 1D probably reflects our very best work. So,
All right. So this is Director Dwyer, and then we'll go to public comment.
Actually, no, we don't
Public
have a
hearing?
first and a second, so we'll continue
Yes.
discussion.
Okay.
We'll continue discussion, and then we'll take a first and a second.
Hang on.
And just for the record, all the maps are on the table, Director Osborne. There's no reason to make a motion to discuss one map or another. It's either the adoption of one map or another.
I'd like to thank former Director Prada for his attention to detail and input. I think those were improvements on the maps. And having said that, I'll move that we approve option 1D, Delta.
Okay, there's a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Director Veerkamp. Now we have discussion from the public.
Further discussion from the board, if there is any. I
Right.
just encourage you to ask Director Day if he has any additional comments, and then we will go to public comments once board discussion
Yes,
is over.
Director Day.
No further comments. I appreciate Brian's feedback on that, and I think it helped us. Thank you.
All right. Now we'll take public input.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is a public comment period for our public hearing on the new district division boundaries. We have a motion on the floor to adopt a resolution establishing new district division boundaries and direct staff to make all necessary technical changes to the adopted map that do not alter any division boundaries, and submit the map and data files to the El Dorado County Elections Department for its use. And the map that is being considered is map alternative 1D, like dog.
All right. Any public?
It does not appear that we have any members of the public wishing to speak. However, I just want to, since former Director Prada is on and listening. I just want to make sure that he does not want to speak and having any technical difficulties. If you want to make a comment, you can do *9 on your telephone, and that will raise your hand, or have the raise your hand button down at the bottom of your computer screen, and that will notify us on this end. So *9 on your telephone, or the raise your hand button on your computer screen. Sorry, I just wanted to give that little extra time. It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak. Would you like for me to call the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote? Division 1,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And President Anzini, if I may just take a moment to express my gratitude. You know, this has been a first for me to participate in a redistricting, and it's been a real pleasure. It's been fun. I've really enjoyed the technical aspect to it, which I don't get to do very often, so that's been a real pleasure. I also echo Director Dwyer's appreciation. Former Director Prada was instrumental in developing this mapping alternative. His insight and his attention to detail was very important, and he, I think, really helped us in this process, so I extend my gratitude. And then, you know, I absolutely can't not conclude without thanking our staff, because you know, I got to be the face of this, but the work was really being done behind the scenes by a lot of people, none more so than Jan Wolf. I mean, he's an absolute magician. I know I've said that before, but I mean, anytime we needed something, it was like done like that. And, you know, he also had not just the technical skills and wherewithal, but also the creativity to come up with, you know, a lot of the products that really assisted us along this way. So Jan, I just want you to know how much I appreciate all the good work that you did. And then, of course, Rachel Sarge, you know, kept us all together. We couldn't have done it without her. But there was lots of others that I probably haven't said, and I just want to say thank you to Jesse Sach and Karen Cross for all the work on the public portal and the website. Mike Brink, Elizabeth Dawson, Tim Ranstrom, Brian Mueller, and then Alex Ayala, our technical person who helps make sure that everything in the board meetings is going smoothly. So just thank you to all of you. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed working with you immensely.
You sound like you just won an Oscar.
Well, thankfully, nobody hit me in the process.
I was going to say that. How dare you? Thank you very much. Public hearing is ended, and we'll move on to information items. Item number 10, Mr. Corcoran. Tell us it's raining outside.
Not enough, not enough.
Not in the moment, but it will be.
Good morning, President Zini, members of the board. We're here for our monthly water supply update. You're going to hear a few important messages from me this morning. I just thought it'd be helpful to highlight at the front end and circle back at the end. So most importantly, we have sufficient supplies to meet our customers this year. We also have sufficient supplies to meet our carryover target at the end of the year. Our demand is up this spring, which, as you know, you looked outside, you should expect that. And we're going to be talking about some of our outreach efforts, kind of how we expect the summer to go. But I just wanted to assure mainly the public that's listening, and also reassure the board that our water supply situation is healthy. So.
Then, Dan, the question we get is, if we have sufficient water to serve our customers, why are we asking for a reduction?
Great question. So the stage 1 water supply alert is an awareness of a potential future water supply shortage. And we'll also talk about stage 2 if there is some outside, non-district supply indices of a mandated conservation. But at this point, for 2022, we're not anticipating the need from a water supply perspective to ask for further conservation. So thank you for that question, because I do get that question often. So. Okay.
Dan, this is Director Day.
Yes, please.
Yeah, could you just highlight for the public, when you say carryover, What do you mean by that, and how that's important?
Great. I will definitely do that. Would you like me to do that now or as part of the presentation?
No, as you continue, just
Sure.
put some emphasis on that.
Sure,
Thank you.
that'd be great. And that way I can use one of my fancy graphics to do that. So, okay. So obviously, as we're well aware, after a very healthy start to the water supply season this fall, we're just wrapping up the third consecutive dry month. And I just looked, and apparently at least the first half of April, we should expect more of the same. So it's important for us to look ahead. So clearly we remain in drought conditions. But even though we are in drought conditions, those storms from late December continue to benefit the district. We're continuing to have runoff into Jacobson Lake that meets or exceeds our supply threshold. And so we've actually been, and I'll explain why, we've actually been throttling how much we take into Sly Park. So our water supply situation is much different than we were last spring. It's hard to rectify that to members of the public to explain. It hasn't rained. Why are we doing so well? There's a lot of knobs that get turned over the course of the winter, and fortunately, all the cards have fallen in place exactly the way we wanted. So we're currently at Jacobson Lake, we're currently about 81%, and we're over now 1,100 acre-feet greater than the peak of last year. So that was at the end of the spring last year. What we do anticipate doing is actually keeping the lake at that level for about the next 60 to 90 days, and I'll explain why in a minute. We also plan to use only local supplies at Folsom again this year. Despite the fact that we were talking about flood control to just maybe 2-3 months ago, it's now shifted very rapidly to extreme drought preparation for those that rely solely on Folsom Reservoir. Fortunately, and federal supplies, fortunately, that's not the case for the district. Next slide, please. So just a quick snapshot. We won't go through all the numbers today, but as you can see, we're obviously doing pretty well. Our reservoirs are pretty full, so it's due to a combination of factors. First, the unfortunate situation, as we discussed before, with the Caldor fire ending our Project 184 season a little early. But then once that did happen, the majority of that additional benefit is from those late storms. We're continuing to carry about 8,000 acre-feet more than we typically do over the course of the winter.
Dan, do you anticipate that Silver will fill?
Yes.
Okay. Normally does, but I just didn't know.
It normally does, but that is, if that doesn't fill, then we're having a different conversation. I agree. That's the worst of the worst scenarios. So as I mentioned, we continue to get some snow melt. It has tapered off a little bit with the cool weather, but last week's warm weather, we did see Camp Creek pick up again, which means that we still have snow on the top of the watershed. The reason that we're keeping Jacobson Lake where it is right now actually is part of our long-term strategic operation for the 2020 water transfer. So when we did that transfer of water for non-rate revenue, which ended up resulting in about $2.8 million, we were able to have an increased demand from Jacobson Lake and transfer some of our Project 184 supplies. So that basically creates a vacated capacity that wouldn't otherwise exist. Without diving too much into the details, we have to meet certain thresholds before we can fill that last little remaining portion. And it has to do with delta inflow, et cetera. Obviously, in a dry spring, we're probably not going to trigger the balance to reduce that the rest of the spring. But because of our ability to use Hazel Creek Tunnel local supplies, we're still able to meet that carryover storage, which is what Director Day's question, which is 25,000 acre-feet at the end of the summer. So we're already looking at what's going to happen this fall. So we plug in pretty conservative demand projections for all of 2022, and then we're targeting that number at the end of 2022, getting ready for if we do end up having a third consecutive dry year in 2023. So. And so we will, once the Project 184 canal is back on and Camp Creek Tunnel does the last little bit of that snow, we'll backfill that to keep Jacobson Lake about the same level through Hazel Creek Tunnel. And a little bit of a twist and irony, we can't use Hazel Creek Tunnel right now to fill that reservoir any greater than it currently is. So the timing is actually working out with the last little part of construction. Next slide, please. Okay, and our famous chart, as we always like to, and so for members of the public, this is storage, annual storage for the history of Sly Park Reservoir. So Sly Park Reservoir spills in about 67% of years. The dark orange line at the top there is our 2021, so you can see how the reservoir performed last year. And the small dashed, or excuse me, the dotted line is how we anticipate, under the most conservative projection, the reservoir would look this year. So as you can see, we've jumped ahead of last year and will likely remain a little bit ahead of that. This does not assume a significant shift in conservation. It's obviously very dry fall, so this is the most conservative projection. Hopefully we'll be north of that, but that's what we're always making sure we hit that 25,000 going into the fall. And then just for comparative purposes, we always include a without Hazel Creek Tunnel option. And in this scenario, we're planning around 5,000 acre feet through Hazel Creek Tunnel. We do have the capacity to move about another 3,000 if we had to. But if we don't need to, we'd rather generate non-rate revenue hydroelectric generation as long as we meet our water supply indices. So those will continue to shift over the spring. But just wanted to give that for perspective. And then for members of the public, the real dark lines with each year, those are comparative of extreme dry years. So you can see how we're faring in terms of, as it relates to extremely dry comparative historical years. Next slide, please. February demand was up, and I mentioned that we were trending that way. And it looks like we're about the same for March, and we'll probably start to see something similar potentially for April. We do expect, similar to last year, that our winter demands, especially when we haven't had any rain, we expect, if you still call it winter, obviously a lot of irrigation happening right now. Once that more of a conservation or gets warm outside, we're likely will see that trend start some increased conservation, and Jesse and his team will be continuing to double down on some of our outreach efforts. This is very similar to what we see across from our neighbors in the Sacramento region through the regional water authorities. So we'll start to see that shift, but year over year, because as you recall, last year it rained until the beginning of March. Well, we haven't had any rain, so a much different first quarter, Q1 of each year. Okay, next slide. And so this is just for a comparative purpose, looking the last 5 years on a monthly time step. Purple is our 2021 demand. So that's, as you recall, last year we were significantly higher in the spring, and we expect that same thing to happen, as I was just mentioning. And as we sort of get into that summer season and really see some of that conservation happening, we'll probably pull back to that line. As you can see, as a growing agency, we always assume conservative projections, and we had that dotted line showing us just a little bit north of where we were last year at the same time. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, beginning of the year, Bureau of Reclamation was doing some flood control operations, and now is, unfortunately, with some of their water supply indices have now switched all the way to the other bookend, and that is public health and safety allocations potentially, which is even less than what our current allocation, which is 25% of our historical use. So as of today, the demand that we have available from the Bureau of the supply that we have available from the Bureau of Reclamation is around 1,600 acre feet. For comparative purposes, we used almost 9,000 out of the reservoir last year. So that's why it's really important for permit 2112 and our local supplies. Next slide. And then you recall a couple presentations ago, we had the red dotted line superimposed on this and the flood control curve. And as you can see, starting March 15th, as Director Day had mentioned a couple meetings ago, that will start to climb. And actually, as of this morning, it's the reservoir is about 568,000. So it's on that climbing limb. And you see that the 50-year average is that sort of light blue polygon. I'm not sure how well that everybody can see that. So we're basically following that line. And now it's just a matter of how full will the reservoir get at the end of the spring. And then the most impactful is because of where Shasta is, how quickly it's going to descend over the course of the summer. We do expect that to be very significant. In fact, we have a call with Reclamation later today to receive the latest information. So we're just assuming very little, if any, supply available from the Bureau, and that's why we're using our permit 2112 supply this year, again, at Folsom Reservoir. Next slide, please. Another informative trend, and this is our snow pillows. As you say, we like lots of graphics here. So this is our snow pillow up by Jacobson Lake. managed by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. It's a 30-year trend. So black is our current snowpack trend. So as you can see, it's been flatlined effectively, about 17, 18 inches of water since New Year's. And we haven't made any additional snowpack. And as you look up the hill when you come up, you can see there's a lot more rock showing. And so those other 2 years, the blue and the red are the past 2 years. So you can see 2020 and 2021. 2021 is red. So we've actually dipped below where we were last year, even at this time. But what's really important to note is our storage is, so we have a lot more in the bank already in Jacobson Lake. We're already at 18,000, actually almost 19,000 acre feet this morning. So the runoff is very early, but we were definitely benefited by being able to capture it and be ready for our customers' demand this year. Next slide, please. So quickly run through our spring. As President Zini said, it's raining outside, fortunately. We hope more, but it doesn't appear that there's much on the horizon. Next slide. So look at next week, and actually this has been updated this morning from the Weather Service, and those unfortunately are now below normal next week, and as well as the following week. Next slide. So those have all now switched to that tan shading. And then last, for the rest of the spring, as we expect, next slide please, sorry. Overall, most likely below normal the rest of spring. And we're ready and expecting that to happen. Okay, next slide. And as we said, it's intuitive, but we remain throughout the West in drought-type conditions. So we're continuing to see favorable trends going into 2023. As I mentioned, that's what we're preparing for now. Overall, most of the long-term models are all aligning on neutral or potentially even slight El Nino type conditions this fall. So that's generally indicative of some higher than average precipitations, not 100%, but hopefully we can climb out of this coming into next fall. Next slide. So as at the last meeting, or probably 2 meetings ago now, we were planning for potentially, if we could actually look at, given the amount of precip that happened during the first part of the winter, is there potential to climb out of that stage 1 water alert, as Director Dorado has mentioned, which is awareness of a potential future supply shortage. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. We've moved in the opposite direction, but we don't, as I mentioned, we don't project needing to ask the board to change our current requests of our customers based upon our supply status and where we're at. The one wild card, as we're obligated to do, if there's a state mandated conservation, and this is what happened in 2014, 2015, where the state, irrespective of our water supply conditions, the state did mandate conservation. At that point, we recommended to the board to move to stage 2 just to conform to those state requirements. So we may find ourselves in that situation. We don't want to speculate, but just wanted to give some forethought to the board if we do find ourselves in that situation going forward. But importantly, I think we have made progress, and I know General Counsel Paulson and some of his colleagues were continuing to advocate for local supply conditions. It was a one solution fits all or fits none type scenario last time around that we're hoping with some of these drought supply tests that Brian Mueller and his staff are looking at of what happens if you have several consecutive dry years, that perhaps those conservation mandates, if they are implemented, will look different than they did last time around. Next slide. We always like to finish with outreach. So we have a few of our highlights of what Jesse and Karen have put together in our most recent waterfront. You'll continue to see more of that into May, into June, as well as some nice pictures, hopefully, of flowing water in the El Dorado Canal. So, and then with our most recent rain, it's probably already been posted today, with our most rain that we had today, asking people to go ahead and put your sprinkler on delay. I think that wraps up. I did, yeah, but I'm happy to just reinforce our Kirk wanted to make sure just for members of the public. So the carryover question is, if you recall from the Jacobson Lake storage slides, that 25,000 acre feet, the beginning of the water year, which is October, which we do conservatively know that we will be able to meet with our customers' demands, and will likely be a little bit north of that. So, questions?
Go ahead, Director Dorado.
Thank you. First of all, I'd really like to shout out to Jesse and the public information crew for getting the word out, very active on the social media things, reminding people to turn off their sprinklers when it rains and conserve, and just doing a great job there, so thank you very much. Then I have a question. Water supply is important, obviously, but so is water quality. And since much of our watershed is in the burn scar, and you and Rodenko made a presentation that said, if I can recall right, that generally the carbon that's from the burn scar enhances the growth of the bacteria, so we have to increase treatment in the water treatment plants. Is that, how's that working out with the new paradigm of our water availability?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And so for members of the public, what we were facing both following the October and the December storms was increased total organic carbon. So it's free carbon as a result of the fire. So it's actually not a bacterial contamination, but interaction with the chlorine to form a disinfection byproducts, which is a long-term health obligation that we're required to maintain. The pilot study for that actually started last week, so that with a potential treatment, as Rodenko described to the board, is very similar. I explained to people, it's kind of like when you go to the pet store and buy for your fish tank the little black carbon, so GAC, granulated activated carbon. So there's a little mini treatment plant that's in series that's not producing water for our customers, that we're testing that technology actually right now. And are happy to say, with some very close monitoring of water age and water quality, that we're on a good trend, and we may actually not even recommend expending those, because, as you recall, are significant funds. So I know Rodenko and his staff are following very closely some of our trends to try to see if we can skirt away from having to expend those funds, but we are going through the pilot study so that we're ready if we do find ourselves in that situation. Given the fact that it hasn't rained, we're not seeing excessive runoff, and that's where we saw those total organic carbon levels really climb along with turbidity. So we have a little bit of, need to be tested again with another good storm for a variety of reasons, but we'll be prepared, and I know we'll have the results of those study, I believe, another month or so.
I'd like to kind of piggyback on that comment that Director Dwyer said, because that was one of the most important things that we heard about the taste. And quite frankly, I never tasted it, but then I did one night when I just used my regular faucet, because I filter everything through my refrigerator filter, which is carbon. And even my pet has a little water fountain that has this carbon thing. So, I mean, to make him drink it or whatever. But in the long run, overall, it seems to me that as we're going more and more into a drier kind of environment, that might be something that we have to predict or possibly invest in. And it would be interesting to find out about the test. I did not see it on social media that we're doing this. Did we?
That's not something that we would, this is a pilot study, where we do a lot of various pilot studies.
Right,
So
right.
it's something we would advise the board. We wouldn't necessarily
Yeah.
promote on social media.
Because I never
as part of our
heard
preparation
that we were
efforts.
doing that. So
Right.
maybe I'm feeling I was reading everything.
No, I think no, that's a great observation, President Zini. I think buried in a lot of technical information that Rodenko shared with us. So there was a lot of information in our presentation, but one of those
Right.
was, should we do we called a mini study before we ask the board to expend significant sums of money, we always do some initial evaluations, whether it's engineering or, in this case, water treatment, and that's what that process is for. So.
Correct. So I want to go over the water conservation and the education part, the outreach. And one of the things that I think that is beneficial for people, especially when people move into our area and have all kinds of questions, but they don't know who to ask. But this is where our public outreach is really important. And I like the idea, I wrote down fix a leak week. This is something that a lot of people are doing right now. I've noticed a lot of lawns being pulled up, trees being chopped down in my area, in Cameron Park. PG&E's coming through. There's a lot of people who are fireproofing, but at the same time, when there's fire mitigation going on around their homes, this is also an opportunity for them to replant with drought-resistant plants, and perhaps how to set up a drip irrigation system. I don't know if we have the personnel to do that, but certainly there are companies that could have like a mini garden fair, and perhaps they could put a little shingle on, this is what we will provide for you for your landscaping needs. And it wouldn't cost us anything, but it would be like maybe at a farmer's market, that this information could be there. And these are just ideas I've always had in my head, but are we ready to do that? And how far do we want to go for outreach? And I think it's really important that outreach is there, because a lot of the population moving here have a different perception of what El Dorado County offers until they finally start going up into the wineries. So until they make it up past Shingle Springs, which I would say that a lot of people do a turnaround. It's Director Days in my area where we have a good deal of more growth, new people in, and that information they're hungry for. So it was just things that have been in the back of my mind. I've talked to many about this, and I think it's really important that we be proactive and offer an opportunity. I mean, at East Bay Mud, I know when we went through the first drought, I worked there, and that was a significant thing, was outreach and public information on how to build a water conservation yard, how to, some people don't know how to apply to remove lawn, which, that can give them some grant money that they could do it with. And I'm just thinking that the community services districts that are involved, El Dorado Hills, I think is already doing something like this. I'm quite sure, but I'm not sure about the other community services districts.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful feedback. I know, Jesse, we do have a water efficiency technician, Bill Cassidy. Everybody knows Bill's smile. So I know it. He works in the customer service group with Jenny, so I'm sure Jesse will be talking with Jenny about some of these ideas. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you. All right. Yes.
Back to the water quality issue, I'm making an assumption that once the Hazel Creek Tunnel is operational again, and we're drawing supplies out of Silver, Caples, Aloha, and Echo, that are not affected so much by the carbonization issue, that water quality out of Sly Park will improve, is that a fair assessment?
I think so. That's a good question. I think what I want to make sure is clear is that the water quality of Reze at Jacobson Lake right now is great.
Yeah.
So I think we were hit with what we called a slug of earthy tones, which was more the turbidity as well as the total organic carbon, but all those levels have subsided. So we have a nice steady inflow right now. So water quality even right now in the sampling right now.
Well, with the piping of the main ditch and subsequent loss of issues of contamination there, that should also help the matter from Res 1, right?
On the chlorination needs of that. Yeah, so that's a different water quality Bacti contamination on that section. So
But the mix should get, even though it's good now, would be improved.
we like to say it's always great.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Any questions from Director Day?
Yeah, thank you, Lori. More of a request. Dan alluded to it earlier. That I still have tremendous concerns that something might be mandated this summer that, as Dan said, one size fits all that fits none. And and I know our customers up here, we've looked at the data, have made tremendous strides in conservation. I mean, I think we're 30% down water usage per capita compared to before the previous drought. And that's baked in, that conservation. And so I really am worried that, we've already baked in 30% conservation. And then if we got hit with another 30%, you're talking about trees dying and all that sort of stuff. And that would be devastating keeping our environment cool and energy use and all that sort of stuff. So my request is kind of from Dan, Jesse, Jim, if we can put together a one-page summary for the board's use for communicating, and possibly for Bob Reed's use in lobbying to look at our customers' conservation per capita since the last drought that's baked in, and also our regional neighbors, how they have fared in that regard as well. And if we could get that data synthesized into a one-page thing for board members' use, and possibly for lobbying use this summer, to try to have more realistic and sensitive mandates if they come, instead of this heavy-handed thing that really doesn't apply to our water situation. So that would be my request, that maybe something like that be put together for us.
Director Day will work on that. I'd like to just share a little bit more. Back in 2014 and 15, it was across the board water conservation mandate without any regard to local utilities' water supplies. In, I think it was 15, 16, and 16, 17, there was a self-certification process where we would submit something to the state saying we have adequate water supplies under this scenario, and they gave us some relief on that. We'll see what happens. I've heard that we may get notice as early as this week, maybe next week, on what type of mandates will be coming out from the state. And as soon as we know, we'll brief the board. We've been pushing on the self-certification because that makes a lot more sense to us, that we would use the water supplies we have today to justify whatever level of conservation. But again, the level of the reservoirs that the Bureau and DWR operate are very, very low, and my guess it will be more across the board than anything else. But we'll keep the board abreast, and we'll work on this one-page summary.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions? Any public comments? Questions?
It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to comment on information item number 10, status update on 2022 water supplies.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan, for your presentation. And after this, we will move on to action items. Item number 11.
Move one.
Second.
Okay, been motioned and second to approve the recommendations of finance for action item number 11. Any discussion? Any public comment?
It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 11, the general warrant registers. Option 1 moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Veerkamp. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Item number 12, Office of the General Counsel, Ms. Leeper.
Good morning, President Anzini and members of the board. Elizabeth Leeper, Senior Deputy General Counsel for the district. I'll be presenting this item today, and then I'm going to hand it over to Bob Reeb of Reeb Government Relations. For today, the board's consideration, we have recommended positions for proposed state legislation, and we'll go into more detail. So district staff works in cooperation with our contract lobbyists, which is Reeb Government Relations. And Reeb Government Relations monitors all of the proposed legislation in our very active legislature. And we identify legislation that may be of interest to the district. At this time, we've identified 45 bills that could affect the district interests. I will note that of those 45, 18 are what we call spot bills, which means they don't have substantive content at this time. However, based on the title of the bill, there's an indication that it may be of interest to the district. So for purposes of this presentation, we haven't identified the spot bills in the PowerPoint because there's really nothing to discuss at this time. But we have laid out the more substantive bills for the presentation today. Next slide. As you'll observe, the diversity of the bills that we're considering today is reflective of just how many items are of interest to the district. So there's a spectrum that goes from employment issues all the way to wildfire prevention, as well as, of course, kind of hot topics such as urban water use objectives. And then always, of course, local government meetings and administration of the district itself. So you'll see that there's a diverse set of subjects for your consideration today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Reeb of Reeb Government Relations, and he will provide you some more detail on the proposed bills for your consideration. Thank you.
Good morning, President Anzini and members of the board. Good to be with you today. I would like to just start off with a bit of an introduction to this year. We had a little over 2,000 pieces of legislation introduced in the first 7 weeks of the legislative session. We went through every one of those to make sure that they did not either have a negative or, if in case of a positive effect on the district. So we've narrowed it down to these 45 pieces of legislation. Policy committee hearings are underway, and the legislature is busy working. They do have a spring recess scheduled the first part of April through April the 17th. So there will be a bit of a break. With respect to the budget this year, they're anticipating another $45 billion budget surplus. The economy in California is growing after the COVID-19 pandemic effects, and we were still seeing significant growth in the stock market. That was driving the capital gains tax revenues. It'll be interesting to see as we move forward the next few months with the stock market dropping and a lot of economic uncertainty in the war in Ukraine, how that will affect that in combination with the inflation impacts. But right now, we're looking at another significant surplus that the legislature is reviewing. So with respect to this legislation, as Ms. Leeper indicated, it's really across all manner of topics. And so she broke this down for you with respect to water, quality, use, availability, and rights. So this first bill, AB 2041, we're recommending a watch position. This is interesting legislation, and this position is informed by the work of the Association of California Water Agencies, of which the district is a member. This bill seeks to require the State Water Resources Control Board to provide for a period of time in which a retail water provider would have to comply with a new primary or secondary drinking water standard. So under current law, almost the day after the State Water Board adopts a primary drinking water standard, the public water system has to comply with that. Well, we know if you have to install some treatment process, a new granular activated carbon, if you've got a VOC issue or something else, it takes time. And this bill would require the state board to provide that compliance period. Aqua has been working with the state board on the Chrome 6 issue to try and get that compliance period in effect. And the state water board has indicated a willingness to do so, but they've resisted the state board a mandatory compliance period. So Aqua's taken a watch position on this. We're also recommending a watch position to see how the Chrome 6 situation with respect to compliance period looks. And if the compliance period is not reasonable in the eyes of the Aqua membership, then this bill may become more active as it moves through the legislature. Next bill is AB 2078 by Assemblymember Flora. It would revise and recast existing law with respect to atmospheric research and forecasting. Probably the most significant part of the bill, however, is a proposed $10 million appropriation to the Department of Water Resources to really increase the level of research and forecasting. And a lot of it deals with technology, both in terms of computer modeling, but also the atmospheric rivers. They're not like the storms we had when we were younger, and we still get them, but the Alaska storms that come in and cold storms that come in about 25 to 30,000 foot elevation. So our radar systems to track those type of storms were designed to look at 25 to 30,000 feet. These atmospheric rivers come in between 5 and 10,000 foot elevation, and so there is new technology, new radar arrays and equipment that will allow us to see these atmospheric rivers. But in the Bay Area, I think we only have about 4 or 5 of these devices, if you will, set up. We're probably going to have to invest more into that. But this bill, I think, moves the state closer to really focusing in on these atmospheric rivers. AB 2605 is a state certification for water quality. We're representing a watch position on that bill. This next bill by Assemblymember Quirk represents some frustration on the part of the environmental community and legislators with respect to the pace that the State Water Resources Control Board has been following with respect to the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. As you can imagine, this plan would affect water use from Bakersfield all the way up to Shasta. So it's a huge part of the state, the Bay Delta watershed. And the state board has been working diligently for a number of years to try and update this plan. The key part of the plan with respect to El Dorado Irrigation District is potential for an increase in what we call unimpaired flows. And that would be what the state board staff has signaled is necessary to protect fisheries and water quality, both in the delta and the fisheries up into the watershed. The initial plan for phase 1 in the San Joaquin Valley was 40 to 70% increase in unimpaired flows, which in that area they're trying to implement the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act as well, and they really are relying or hoping to get more surface water. But if this plan requires a greater amount of water to flow out in March to June, then that's going to have a significant water supply impact. Could be the same impact up here. They're involved in phase 2, which affects your area now. So this bill kind of takes a ham-handed approach, if you will. It sets a deadline for the State Water Board to finish up all phases of the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan update and implementation by the end of 2023. Right now, the schedule doesn't look like the State Board can achieve that and still provide due process and the evidentiary hearings that are required to have a plan that can be implemented. And on the other end of implementation, of course, there's still a great degree of interest up here and in the San Joaquin Valley with what we call the voluntary agreements process, where there would be investment in habitat restoration and things to help the fish that's aside from simply putting more water down into the rivers, which certain times of the year is likely going to be needed. But the second part of this is it would prohibit the State Water Board from processing any water rights permits applications that are before it now, and that includes a very important one for this district. So there's really unlikely to be any significant impacts by processing those permits, and it's important to note that the State Water Resources Control Board always, since the early 1980s, includes a condition that they maintain continuing jurisdiction over those permits. So they can come back at any point in time and reopen those permits under their own initiative. So because this has a direct impact, at least the second half of the bill on water rights permit processing, we're recommending a opposed position on that bill. SB 1157. So again, back in 2016-17, the legislature adopted, and for those of you who are active on the board or in water generally, there was SB 606 by Senator Hertzberg and AB 1668 by another member, escaping me right now, of Assemblymember Laura Friedman, and that took urban water use and broke it into 4 areas: commercial, industrial, institutional, indoor residential water use, outdoor residential water use, and water loss standard. And you'll recall we've talked about this before. Well, part of the law that went into effect for the urban or the indoor residential water use standard was a requirement that before those levels were ratcheted down. Right now it's 55 gallons per capita per day, but it's supposed to go down to 52 and then 50 by the year 2030. This law required that the Water Resources Control Board and the Department of Water Resources assess the impact of reducing that indoor residential use on the sewer collection system, on the sewer treatment process, on the ability for wastewater treatment operators to meet their effluent limitations in the discharge, and also on recycled water supply. So in addition, that the state agencies were supposed to collaborate and work with the water systems, both the public water systems and the wastewater systems, to get a better understanding of what this reduced standard would mean in terms of operations. Association of California Water Agencies and the California Municipal Utilities Association responded to a report that was finalized by the Department of Water Resources last year that recommends that those standards drop down ultimately to 42 gallons per capita per day. So a significant drop in indoor residential water use standard. And the Aqua and CMUA were not happy with the way that was done because the studies weren't done and there was very little, if any, collaboration. This bill would implement those standards that the Department of Water Resources developed. Why is that important? Well, while the indoor residential water standard is not a mandate on individual households, in other words, no one's going to come to your home and knock on the door and say, take a shorter shower and buy a new dishwasher. But this indoor residential water use standard does fit into the calculation of your urban water use objective. And to the extent you're not able to, customers are not able to hit that standard, you're going to have to make up for that in your water use, loss of distribution system. You're going to have to make up for it for your indoor or your outdoor residential standard, or your commercial, industrial, and institutional, schools, hospitals, kind of those, larger water users. So if you ratchet down on one of the 4, you're going to have to ratchet down in the other 3. So Aqua, CMUA, member agencies have targeted this bill as one of the high priorities this year to try and stop, or at least to say that you can't, again, impose these lower standards until these studies and investigations are done and that collaboration does occur. So we're recommending a not favor on this. We'll be actively working on it with Aqua members.
But one of the perplexing things is this whole arena has been how do we measure this, because in the rural environment now I can understand it in San Francisco or San Jose, it would be easy to monitor this, I think. But when our arena, with outdoor landscaping, it goes through 1 meter and it's supposed to be indoor monitoring of this 55, 52, 50, 42, whatever. And it's a district-wide proposal. That's the plan, I think. But how do we monitor that if if I take a short shower but I water my lawn, and my wife's flowers die or don't die, how has anybody really thought about this is going to be worked?
They've thought about it, but they haven't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So there's a couple of ways one of the ways is that obviously if you separated the meters, so you had 2 meters, one for residential outdoor and indoor. Of
Okay,
course, that's
so who's going to pay for that?
Exactly. It's going to be very expensive to do, and it probably doesn't make sense in most areas. That would be the kind of like the Cadillac approach to figuring it out. The other way, there's other ways. You can do an outdoor water use survey, if you will, based on aerial data and looking at the type of landscape that's present and calculate what the evapotranspiration rates are and what's necessary to keep that stuff alive, your wife's flowers alive. The Department of Water Resources has been working on that aerial analysis, both in terms of the physical part of how you do it and then the analytical portion for a number of years now, and it's still not quite dialed in yet. So the other thing you can do is how you do here and calculate your sewer rates is you can just take that indoor residential water use in a normal,
Yeah, but
December,
for us folks who are on
January,
septic tanks, there's going to be somebody monitoring a septic tank?
No,
You know,
no.
I mean-
It's a calculation, and it's going to get better over time, but it's a challenge.
Okay,
Yeah,
stand by.
yeah. You can sample too. You can look at with the indoor devices and things. But the concern, one of the concern is its cost. It's going to cost the public water system significantly more. And as Director Day indicated, the 30% conservation that you have baked in since 2014, it's going to be increasingly difficult to achieve, say, a 42-gallon per capita per day standard in any given home. And what you're really looking at that point is the older housing stock and buying washing machines and dishwashers and toilets to help people get to that level. It really becomes what is in the home, not necessarily what the long showers or, full dishwashers.
Well, I see this diametrically opposed to good defensible space where we're telling people to irrigate their lawns out 30 feet away from the house, or, because not everybody's gonna put dirt up to their house for 30 feet. And I just see there's all kinds of complications in this thing running together that just don't equate.
Right.
And, we have lawns that I factor into, my house is a poster child for defensible space. But part of that is because it's irrigated lawn. And, I'm gonna keep doing that, because, well, for a variety of reasons. But I just see all kinds of conflicts in this thing.
Director Dwyer.
Thank you. Bob, I have a more simple question. What's the difference between oppose and not favor?
Good question. So an oppose is where our firm goes over across the street to the Capitol and knocks on doors, testifies in committee, makes phone calls, does that level of activity. And not favor, we write letters, and we will focus our effort on your legislators. So Assembly members Kiley and Bigelow and Senator Daly, we'll contact them, but we won't set up meetings with legislators from San Diego or Fresno or San Francisco to talk about your position, up here in El Dorado County. Any other questions on this bill?
So just to piggyback on his question, how about regionally? Do you work with the other, like Mountain County Waters agencies? I don't know if they're your clients or whatever, but I would assume that as a regional effort, that would be, you have more clout? Other
Yes.
than just El Dorado County?
Right. So So first of all, our firm represents 7 urban retail water suppliers throughout the state. And we are then able to access more than just your delegation. We have relationships with legislators in the Palm Springs area, Temecula, Los Angeles. And so we'll be communicating positions with those folks as well. We also work with Regional Water Authority. We participate in their legislative regulatory meetings every month and hear what the folks in that region are doing. We also participate in the Aqua State Legislative Committee that Mr. Paulson chairs. And we, I don't know, I'm not shy about advocating on behalf of my clients in those meetings. And so we hope to help shape Aqua's response as well. We participate in some of the region calls with, so the Aqua State Ledge Committee is 40 members plus the chair, and each region has 4 members, and those 4 members and others will typically have a phone call ahead of the State Legislative Committee meeting and talk about, from a regional perspective, about these bills. So yes, to answer your question, there's a lot of groups, work groups, lobby colleagues that we work with to coordinate the message so that ideally all 80 assembly members and 40 senators are hearing about bills like this and the opposition from the urban retail water community.
Thank you. All right.
SB 1205, this is a bill that would deal with water rights appropriations, and it is one of a handful of bills that was introduced to in response to a report that was kind of sponsored by the Planning Conservation League. This bill would do 2 things. Again, a lot of these bills are have a lot of parts. The first part of this bill is probably a good thing. It would require the state board to develop and adopt regulations to provide greater specificity as to determining water supply availability in any given year, or in the issuance of new water rights permits. With climate change and the impacts to rainfall versus snowfall and increasing temperatures, drier soils, the runoff and things like that are changing. So this bill would ask the state board to take a look with a new lens, through a new lens of climate change, to help determine water supply availability. But the second part of this bill requires that consideration of the effects of climate change upon watershed hydrology. And that's the part of this bill that is problematic, because when you look at the 3rd climate assessment report that was issued, I think last year, they don't have the science or the methodology or the algorithms to be able to assess the impact of climate change on a watershed basis. I mean, you're talking like between, I don't know, is it latitudes going up and down the earth? My geology's getting rusty, but anyway, the level of the ability for them to determine the effect of climate change on a watershed basis, this little tiny postage stamp out of the whole planet, is not there. So we're going to try and get that portion of the bill amended out and simply require the state board to work towards better analysis framework. The next group of bills is local government meetings. These bills all try to move the Brown Act more into the era of teleconference meetings, and to make sure that the public still has access, that the meetings are open and transparent, that your agendas and agenda items are available online for people or for them to come in. And so the first 2 bills, AB 1944 and AB 2449, are trying to further improve the teleconferencing capability. Outside of a pandemic or a health emergency where you would not meet in person, you would have to have a teleconference location noticed and the public to have access. So for example, under current law, if you're outside of a pandemic, Director Day would have to have a agenda on his front door and have the public be allowed to come in and sit with him to participate in the meeting.
For the record, he does.
Yes, so if you're not in an emergency, that has to be posted and that has to be, but it doesn't make sense if you have a location where the public can come and you provide it so they don't have to be in different places. AB 2647 is simply allowing or making sure the materials for meetings are provided online and in physical locations that the district determines. So we're going to recommend a favor on all of those. Aqua's working with some of the attorneys in the state legislative committee to do some fine tuning on the first two bills.
Because that's what we've been doing for the past 2 years.
Yeah. So miscellaneous. This is like soup to nuts here. So the first bill would expand the definition of a public work to include fuel reduction, tree trimming, tree falling, things like that. We're recommending a opposed position. This bill is one in a trend where the operating engineers and the Building Trades and Construction Council are trying to expand the definition of public works, which traditionally has been construction projects. But now they're trying to move beyond construction projects to capture any sort of contracts that a local agency would let with respect to, that could involve trades or the construction folks or what have you. So this bill would make those fuel reduction projects prevailing wage jobs outside of what's traditionally a construction project. Aqua and its members are arguing against this bill because it will not only reduce the amount of work that be done if you increase the labor cost by 40%, but it's this trend of moving away from the tradition of public works being construction projects. So this is an active opposed position on this bill. AB 1953, we put up here as a watch position. It would require at least one public building for, say, for the El Dorado Irrigation District or the city or the county or a library district where the public can have access to the building. They would have to have at least one accessible water bottle refill station. The reason we have a watch on this is because the bill does provide that if there's a cost for a local agency to put one of these in, that they can come back to the state and file a claim for reimbursement.
Yeah, right.
What, yeah. Well, if you go to the Safeway or Rayleigh's, they have those places they could fill big bottles. I mean, so is there going to be any backlash from the say supermarket people saying, wait a minute, you're infringing on our business?
So that's a great question. It's a question that we have that we're putting to the author of this bill, because we believe they're intending to just retrofit or put in drinking water fountains. Like if you go up and you push the button and get a drink of water, that you have to also have the ability to put your personal water bottle to fill. What you're talking about is a 5-gallon type refill stations that are already regulated by the state of California through the local environmental health officer. We don't believe the author is tending to deal with those, but it needs to be clarified in law. And for our clients that are down in the San Joaquin Valley that are operating these nitrate management zones, they're required to have the 5-gallon bottle fill stations constructed and made available for the public who their shallow wells have been contaminated by nitrates. Those cost between $30,000 and $40,000 by the time you get through the permitting and that process. So we're trying to get that question answered, but we don't think he's, in this case, trying to get to the bigger 5-gallon bottle
Well,
stations.
some of the convention centers that I've recently gone to, those are built in with the water bottle because it's to reduce the amount of plastic bottles being thrown away.
Yeah, and the waste of
And the-
not being able to drink the whole stream.
Exactly. Yeah, it does save water, but in the case of perhaps having a filling station somewhere, I kind of picture it like an ATM that, you know, for instance, people in the valley could get a card so they could get their water. They have shown that they have no water available, the potable water issue versus non-potable.
Right.
So, you know, it's trying to identify certain areas, but, you know, I think this is kind of like technology. This is what's happening, folks, and if it conserves water, then certainly it makes sense.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be a cost, but we don't think it's a significant cost overall. So this next one we should really talk about here because this is a controversial bill, and this is AB 1993 by Assemblymember Wicks, and it would require every employer to require that their employees provide proof of having received COVID-19 vaccinations. It's 2 shots, not the booster. And the bill is silent, though, with respect to what happens if an employee doesn't provide proof. In that case, in this case, the district submit a report on, say you have 100 employees, and 98 provided proof, but 2 didn't. If you don't show proof for those 2, the district would be fined. The fine is not in the bill.
Talk to the professional football players.
Right. So our concern is this. If the state of California wants to mandate that every citizen that's eligible to receive a vaccination has one, then they should talk about that in the legislature. But by saying that employers are the point to make sure that, in essence, that mandate is followed, if you will, it's putting employers in a bad place. And in particular, it's our concern that with respect to those that provide essential services like a water district, I mean, you can imagine, or your corporation yard, if half of the employees didn't provide proof, then where are you? In an emergency or a broken pipe or someone runs over a water hydrant or something like that. So we feel that for essential services, it could have the potential to harm your ability to provide those services. So we're recommending a not favor, which is an oppose. We'd send a letter to your delegation and to committees and what have you. Really, I think the issue here is, again, if the state of California wants to mandate it, then they should adopt that mandate like they do for children with measles and mumps and rubella. But putting this on the employer's plate is not appropriate. AB 2005, it would provide some changes to the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan. There's not a lot of detail in this bill, so we're going to watch it and see what the author intends to do with it. AB 2108 is a bill that, again, is kind of like a 3-part bill. It would direct the Water Resources Control Board and the Office of Planning and Research to be more aggressive in terms of environmental justice and tribal outreach, to have that brought into the rulemaking process, to make sure that those viewpoints are identified and taken into account when they're doing policies, regulations, programs, and grants and loans. The part of this bill that we don't like is that it would require the governor to appoint a person to the State Water Resources Control Board. Four of the 5 members of the state board have to have one's an attorney, one's a civil engineer, one's a professional engineer, and one is an engineer in water quality. The 5th person on the state board doesn't have to have any qualifications with respect to expertise or experience. This bill would say that one person of those first four has to have a proven history of advocacy for environmental justice and tribal issues in disadvantaged communities. We don't believe that's an appropriate, The State Water Resources Control Board, since its inception in 1967, has a duty to balance competing uses. It has a duty to try and achieve the highest water quality, for example, that will reasonably meet all beneficial uses. The state board is not an advocate. The state board is there to do the best they can based on evidence. And it should not be where the board now is made up of individuals who have an advocacy role. So we're recommending not favor unless amended. Leave the part of the bill that brings more involvement from the environmental justice community, but take out the portion that has this advocacy role for one of the members. AB 2113, a not favor. This bill was part of AB 377 that the district opposed last year. If you remember, that was the bill that would have mandated that all waters of the state be fishable, drinkable, and swimmable by 2050.
Fishing's okay.
Yeah. But that bill was held in the Appropriations Committee, very controversial. Aqua, the regulated community, there's a long list of people opposed to this. This is one part of that bill, and it takes the water pollution and cleanup and abatement account, which right now the state board prioritizes in any given year as to where the water quality impacts may be the worst, from discharges. For example, in 2017, after the wildfires, every grant that year went to water quality projects to address the impact of wildfire impacts to the rivers and streams. This bill takes that water pollution cleanup and abatement account and breaks it into, it takes half of it and would apply that to the waterways recovery account, which would get to these impaired water bodies in California. It would take 5% and put it into a community capacity development, which doesn't result in any cleaner water. It would take another 5% for participation, funding participation for EJ or disadvantaged communities. We're recommending a not favor. We think that it shouldn't restrict the ability of the state board to identify where the most need is. Certainly if there's a public health threat, that the money should be able to go there and not just go to clean up some impaired water body where maybe it's a recreation beneficial use or a fishery beneficial use as compared to drinking water. So we're going to recommend a not favor on that bill. Okay, moving through these, the top one would continue the 5% retention limitation on contracts. It's been in effect now for about 10 years. This would eliminate future sunsets, so it would just be the law. AB 2221, accessory dwelling units. That's a not favor unless amended. Let me refresh my memory real quick on that one. So this one really is targeted towards land use agencies, cities and counties, with respect to how they permit these, and then the timeline. It would set a 60-day timeline for any service upgrades. But it also has a definition of permitting agency that includes special districts. So we think this bill is hopefully unintentionally mixing land use decision-making and project approval with what you do, and that's, providing connection to, for a new service. The particulars of the bill don't make sense for public water systems, and so we're asking the author to remove the special district piece with respect to public water systems or community sewer systems.
I have a question regarding
Yes.
that. Didn't El Dorado County just approve an ADU policy? I'm trying to remember.
I'm sure they did because this
Just-
is
just-
about the 30th ADU bill that we've been tracking in the last 5 years. And we negotiate to make sure that the permitting agency portions of these laws are separate from those that simply provide service. And it just seems like we think at the end of each of the last 5 years, Brian's laughing, that there's no more law that could be done with respect to these things. But now there's a bill that, we don't have it here because it doesn't affect you so much, but they had us, your setback requirements are typically 10 feet or 15 feet from the property line. Well, last year, they reduced that for these ADUs to 4 feet from the property line. This year, they're trying to say 0. So you could have a wall of an ADU, right? It could be your fence for the next door neighbor, essentially. But the problem they ran into 2 years ago was the overhead power line folks said, well, wait a second. If I've got a new house now underneath my power line, the power line breaks in a storm, and I light that little house up like a torch, we don't want that liability. So the legislature didn't move the setback back to where it was. They gave liability protection for the power line folks.
So I'm going to go back to my question, though. You're saying to remove the community service, to remove the special districts. We are a special district in many places.
Yeah, so what we would remove, because this bill is targeted towards the permitting agencies. If the permitting agency, as a term or condition, is saying that the property owner has to improve the street or put a sidewalk in or something like that in terms of improvements, this bill would say that they have 60 days. But you're not a permitting agency, so we're trying to keep you out of the requirements and the process that the city or county would have, because you're not one of those. The bigger concern here is that, it gets a little technical, but these ADUs typically go onto an existing family, single-family home.
I've seen a lot of them in
Right.
my neighborhood.
Or they're built with a
Right.
new single-family home and this ADU in back. But in your district, you have service for ag properties. And if one of these gets put on an ag property where you don't have an existing residential structure, then this 60-day period would apply to you, and staff feels like that could be difficult to achieve in any given time. So it gets pretty complicated, but we're just trying to keep the city and county permitting side separate from the special districts that provide the services. The next bill is a proposed $7 billion general obligation bond measure. Would go on the November 2022 ballot. We're recommending a watch position. We're not convinced with a $5.2 billion appropriation last year for these purposes and another $750 million proposed by the governor this year, that there's a need for more debt for these projects, but we'll see if it starts to move this year. And if it does, we'll weigh in on, just as we did during the last bond, about the portions of this that the district could benefit from. AB 2419 would require the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed by the Congress and signed by President Biden last fall. It would require 40% of that money that comes to California to be expended on disadvantaged communities. So out of that act, there's about $3.725 billion that's coming to California for water and wastewater through the state revolving funds. This bill would say 40% of that has to go to disadvantaged communities. Now, there is some analysis that shows there is a need, obviously, in disadvantaged communities, but again, the bill would restrict the ability for the State Water Resources Control Board to allocate grants and loans to where it may be most needed in any given year. And I'll give you an example. 5 years ago, no one was concerned about Chrom-6, hexavalent chromium. The state board established a new primary drinking water standard, which then forced or required public water systems who had that in their water supply to invest in treatment plants. Very expensive. State board responded by providing more funding, allocating for those public water systems to assist them, like in the Coachella Valley, to treat their water to meet that new standard. If you have a bill like this that says 40% off the top has to go to disadvantaged communities, again, very laudable, and there's needs there, but it removes the discretion of the State Water Board to target funding in any given year for projects. So we're asking that that piece of the bill, that 40%, be removed. AB 2447 is now a new bill. This Assemblymember Rodriguez took this bill and moved it over to another bill. I don't know why, but it's now AB 1741. But what we're looking at here is that he's looking to improve emergency preparedness and hazard mitigation and mutual aid. And he is proposing a $500 million appropriation to each year to improve preparedness, hazard mitigation, mutual aid. And so we're recommending a favor on that, obviously because of the fire hazard and the wildland-urban interface up here. AB 2536 deals with development fees. This is another bill. This author, Assemblymember Grayson, has been very focused on attacking the affordable housing challenge that California has by trying to ratchet down on impact fees, connection fees, and capacity charges. Again, a laudable goal, affordable housing, but to impact the service providers like the district by requiring studies, and he's taking connection fees and capacity charges, and he is conflating them with the type of impact fees, like school impact fees or road fees, where because of the development, a new school or a new road has to be constructed and therefore paid for. Connection fees and capacity charges are after the fact of your investment. In other words, when someone comes here today to build a house, the district doesn't say, well, you're gonna have to wait because we're gonna have to build a water treatment plant, or we're gonna have to add, capacity here, capacity there. So it's one of those apples and oranges bills, and we're opposing that because we don't feel what he's trying to achieve really applies to connection fees and capacity charges. They're not really development fees in the strictest sense of city or county. How many more? The last one, okay. There's just a few more.
Wake up, everybody.
AB 2556, this bill expands the amount of time that an employee organization can, I think, respond to a last, best, and final offer. We're recommending a not favor. At that point in time, it's just adding time without any true benefit to the process. AB 2673 would take the trustee agencies like the Department of Fish and Wildlife that are in the CEQA guidelines and put them into the CEQA statute. We're recommending a watch on that one. SB 880 removes a sunset date that authorizes the University of California Cooperative Extension to offer courses in the monitoring and reporting for water diversions. We're recommending a favor. SB 1044 is a bill that would say you cannot, as an employer, sanction or tell an employee that in the event of a natural disaster, they have to stay at work. And it's diametrically opposed to the disaster service workers designation that most public employees have, especially water and wastewater providers. And we're going to oppose this bill unless it's amended to recognize that if they are a disaster service worker, that they have to comply with the existing law with respect to the employer's ability to say, you need to stay here and keep the treatment plant operating. Obviously, if you got a 80-foot wall of fire blowing through the area you're going to get your people out. But if there's a fire across county, the law says that you can provide folks the ability to check with their family, to call them, to help them get out. But just to take off for a week or two, that's not allowed. So we're going to oppose unless amend that bill. SB 1219, we're going to watch. It's a bill that Senator Hurtado's not happy with the State Water Resources Control Board, so she introduced a bill to get rid of it. You can do that when you're a senator or assembly member. It's not going anywhere, so, but we're going to watch it. And the final one here this morning is SB 1345. This bill is from the Dig Safe Board in Southern California. And again, a good bill that seeks to, what it does and the portion that we're concerned about is it would establish a kind of a two-tier notification requirement. If an excavator hit a natural gas pipeline or a pressurized sewer line or something that is going to pose an imminent threat to public health and safety, they have to immediately call 911 and immediately contact the subsurface pipe owner and operator. The second tier is things like telephone cables, sewer lines, water lines.
Internet.
And that they have to, they have up to 2 hours to notify, and then they simply have to then notify the Dig Safe alert people. We want to support this bill because it's got a lot of good definitional tightening up of the subsurface installation area of law. However, we feel that the breaking of a sewer line, whether it's pressurized or not, should also require immediate notification. There is a threat to public health and safety and to fisheries as well. And you are liable for significant fines, 25,000 and up. It's like 4 cents a gallon or 10 cents a gallon. So we don't want to wait for 2 hours to get a phone call that a sewer line in, town center is broken. Not good. So we're going to support this bill, but we only support it if they move the sewer line up into that higher tier. Next slide. So, a lot on the plate this year, and we think these are the bills right now that really argue for the district to weigh in on. A lot of the spot bills have been amended in the last couple of weeks, so we'll work with staff. We may be back next month if necessary, but if they're similar to some of these other bills, we won't come back and bother you about positions on those. It's going to be a busy year, so please answer any questions.
Any questions?
1943 Bigelow's bill, in your write-up, I was reading this last night, and I would have called you, but I know you old guys go to bed early, so to get a question. So what's, I mean, it seems innocuous to me. I don't know, what's the parameters of this one?
I haven't looked at it since he amended it. Again, this is a spot bill up until last week, late last week. So I'll have to take a look at it. But it deals with tiny homes. So if you're a mouse, no. I don't know. I'll find out and get back to you. It
All right.
probably doesn't apply to the district, but I'll make sure. I've got maybe 20 bills like this that I've got to go back.
I think a tiny home is like an ADU.
It is, but I think it's mobile. So
Okay.
it could be picked up and moved with a trailer hitch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions?
I will move approval with a facetious amendment. SB 1219 needs to be amended to limit the number of assembly and legislators and put them at part-time.
I don't think that's going to work.
So for the record,
Oh,
Director
sorry.
Veerkamp is moving option 1
I'll
With-
second.
Without amendment.
without any alternative motion or alternative language to the option. It's action item number 12. Option 1, approve recommendations of Reeve Government Relations LLC as the district's official positions on proposed state legislation.
As presented.
I'll second. And Bob,
Yeah.
thank you and your organization for doing all the analysis and digging deep and making the recommendation.
I have great staff. When I first started working with the district back in
2006.
2005. Yeah, 2005.
Otten 6.
Yeah, it was me, myself, and I, but now I
Yeah.
have Raquel Ayala Vargas, an attorney that works with me, and Kenneth McKelvey, who does a lot of this research and gets the fact sheets from the author's office and schedules appointments for us, and my son Seth and Dana Nickel really do the bulk of work for our veteran service organization clients. So we've got 5 of us that can go over and try and put out fires, where before I was, I would be up till 2 or 3 in the morning, so.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second on the floor. Approval?
It was moved by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Osborne. Director Dwyer was a little late.
Oh, so the correction is from the board clerk. So,
And I think that Director Day may have something
yes,
to
I was
say.
just going to ask him.
Yeah, just a question for Bob. Jim had kind of touched on it, but what is your sense around the State Water Board and around the state legislature about possible water restrictions this summer?
Good question. So we have been engaged with the Association of California Water Agencies and the California Municipal Utilities Association for over a year now in messaging to the State Water Board with respect to either a one-size-fits-all conservation mandate, or you'll recall Governor Brown had a kind of a tiered system. I think EID was at 25%, others were at 36%, some were lower. Our messaging has been, please don't do that. And we are pointing to the change in state law that occurred 2 or 3 years ago, I don't recall the specific date, that really beefed up the requirements for public water systems to engage in drought contingency plans and to identify in those plans, which are local, the drought stages and the water supply and water use numbers that would trigger the local public water system to impose water use restrictions or conservation goals. It doesn't make sense for the legislature to put that requirement on public water systems and for public water systems to comply and prepare those plans based on local numbers and local situation to now come back and have a statewide conservation mandate. So that's the message that we've given to the state board and the governor's office. The state board has not imposed anything yet. They are more focused on curtailment orders to protect the natural environment and on assessing water supply in more isolated systems. So we're hopeful that they will continue on that path. They do say every year that, or every month, that the water use data is reported by public water systems, that they will look at that and then make a decision. I haven't seen anything yet that indicates they're ready to go to either a one-size-fits-all or a state conservation mandate, but that could happen.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Yeah, keep pushing that. The whole idea that we have to create these contingency plans and then they take away the power for us to use them, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Right. Are there any comments or questions from the public?
As a reminder, if members of the public would like to address the board during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 12, option 1, moved by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Osborne. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote, Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It
Appreciate your
is
time.
very informative, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Great, thank you.
Next, item number 13, engineering.
Actually, Director Anzini, though we would like to consider action item number 13 and 14 as separate items, we are only going to have one PowerPoint to consider both of the items, but they will be separate actions.
There are 3 from engineering, so
Right,
one, you
we're
said
just doing 13 and 14, the battery, both of them are battery.
Good.
One is the wastewater and one is the headquarters.
Yes.
So when we do, after the presentation, we do make a motion, we will need a motion separately on action item number 13 and action item number 14.
Thank you. Take it away.
Okay, so good morning. Again, John Money, Senior Civil Engineer, and this morning I am giving an update on our battery energy storage systems projects throughout the district. Those include projects at our water, wastewater, and here at headquarters, and that's the reason for the separate agenda items. To date, the water has been funded and complete, so otherwise we'd have 3. But we're just, again, having a general update, and then we'll address the funding request for wastewater and headquarters and agenda items number 13 and 14.
Okay.
Go ahead, next slide, please. So again, just some history. In 2020, October 2020, we're to the board to give an update on we plan an update for our in-conduit hydro and solar facilities, and right about that time, some additional funding opportunities opened up for the district, and we included battery storage and moved forward with permission to pursue a partnership with Tesla to see where we can qualify for that funding and where we could allocate these facilities throughout our district. In June of last year, again, we had a consent item for additional funding for our for battery sites located at water facilities, authorizing an additional $150,000 for those installations. And then again, or most recently on the most recent CIP plan, we have CIPs for installations at 2 of our wastewater facilities and here at district headquarters. So the reason we're doing this again is Board Policy 8020 basically ask staff to, where possible, seek out additional energy augmentation and generation facilities where they're economically viable. And of course, the biggest reason for that is one of our largest fixed costs is our monthly bills to PG&E, and those have been trending up. So beginning in 2017, we were looking at about $4.8 million a year. As of 2020, that's escalated to $5.5 million a year. We would have 2021 numbers in here, but PG&E has had a kind of catastrophic system-wide failure of updating some of their billing. So we're still waiting for our Deer Creek bill to come in and total all that amount. But in general, it looks like that's stabilizing with bringing in our solar and other projects online.
So we don't have 2021 yet.
We do not yet. We should have that probably in about another month or so. I would hope, but we're about 7 months out on waiting for correction for that one facility. So again, just some history on our past projects. The district's first alternative energy project was at El Dorado Hills wastewater treatment plant in 2006, where we added a 1 megawatt solar facility at that location. That was followed in 2018 by bringing in conduit hydro project online at Res 7, and that energy is used to supplement costs or to offset costs for our Folsom Lake intake facility, the pumping costs that we incur there. And then in fall of last year, we completed 2 additional solar projects, 1.6 megawatts at El Dorado Hills and another 2.35 at our Deer Creek wastewater treatment plants. Both of those facilities, the district does not own. We're in power purchase agreements with a third party, which gives us the best economic bang for the buck. That moves us on to, again, what our topic for today. So we are pursuing 8 total sites for, or best projects at 8 sites, 5 water sites, and those 5 water sites have already been completed to date. And then 2 additional at 2 wastewater sites, and then again here at district headquarters. What makes these projects viable is the CUPC under their self-generation incentive program, or SGIP, offer $1 per watt hour produced rebates. And in general, what that does is that completely pays for installation, or provision and installation of the battery facilities. What it does not qualify, or it does not pay for, is any additional site improvements that we need to make in order to accommodate those facilities. In order to qualify for the SGIP funding, there's a kind of a laundry list of requirements. You've had to have had at least 2 PSPS events in the previous year, and so this was back to, we qualified in 2020, so it was two events in 2019. You have to be located in a high fire threat district. You have to provide service to a disadvantaged or low-income community, and then you also have to be a provider of essential services, which for us are water and wastewater. So this is generally what the best facilities are composed of. They're pretty simple in general. They have three big components. The first is, or labeled there, as a power pack converter. So that converts your AC power to your DC storage and your batteries. Depending on the site, you have several of what's marked to there, just battery pack modules. So they can add or subtract those depending on the load of the site. And then the last is that great big box on the bottom, which is usually a switch gear that intercepts the PG&E, the incoming power to the site, and ties that to these new systems. So what that does is it can direct either power from PG&E or power from the battery, or a combination of the two, to meet loads at your facilities. This is a summary of the projects that we are pursuing or have pursued to date. Again, so the first 5 have been constructed at our water treatment or water sites to date. We're pursuing an additional 2 for wastewater and 1 more here at headquarters. In total, it comes to about $10.6 million in incentives that we've received have received or will receive from the program. You'll see that this is emerging technology, because although the total the cost of the batteries is at 10.6, over about 20 years, that's estimated to return to the district about $7.5 million in saved energy costs. So if we were paying for this up front and paying it all for the district, it's not viable at this time. However, because we're getting those incentives, it makes it more than worth our time, saving $7.5 million on projects that we wouldn't have had. Really, again, the reason for this program is the batteries in general provide 3 benefits, both to the district and to the power provider. Those are PSPS, or public safety power shutoff mitigation, as well as peak shaving. That's our energy savings, and then demand response. So the first of that, again, is the PSPS mitigation. So, in general, these batteries provide some degree of backup power or supplementation for the site. Whenever a PSPS event is called for in the future, instead of doing a normal operation where they're offsetting power and trying to do some power savings, the batteries will completely just bank that energy until the PSPS event actually occurs. So what that does is, again, it leaves the battery with full charge and able to run our sites for a limited duration, depending on how the batteries were sized and funded under the initiative. So really, what that equates to is from our 8 sites, it's 7 to 43 hours of range. So regardless, during an extended outage, PSPS, we're still going to need generators eventually. But what this does is it allows our operations staff some flexibility. We don't have to immediately respond to all of our sites. These 8 sites, they've got a minimum of 7 hours where they can make sure that the generators are going to fire up correctly and stage their efforts while they're addressing problems in other areas. Again, what we're largely considered is peak shaving or power savings for the district, and that occurs in 2 different ways. The first is that the batteries, they charge during off-peak hours, and then will fully discharge to power the site during peak times. So that's typically for the district, that's 4 to 9 p.m. And so that saves you that peak demand or your peak power demands during that, or premium during those periods. In addition to that, they normalize the energy coming into the site. So a lot of our sites have large pumps, and when those pumps fire off, it's a huge spike in energy that has to go into that facility. And every time we do that, well, not every time, but the largest time we do that during the month, we get billed a demand response or a demand charge based on that peak demand that our site uses. So it helps to normalize those spikes come into our sites and reduces those charges on our monthly bill. And then the last is, again, a benefit to us, but also a huge benefit to the power providers, is that it helps to just generally stabilize, buffer some of that capacity throughout the utility grid. So here's some screenshots. So as part of these projects, when we're up and running, we get some really good diagnostics of our sites. So going from left to right, it's during a course of a day, the energy used at a site, what the battery is doing, and then the power that's actually being provided from PG&E. And so if you look at that first box on the left in the blue, you'll see again that our demand kind of fluctuates throughout the day, and then you'll see 2 or 3 spikes in there where pumps have kicked on or something similar. And that's, again, where we get those demand response charges on our monthly bill. You go across to the green, you can see what our battery is doing. And so, again, anything below kind of that flat line, the battery is charging. Anything above it, it's discharging. So during our off-peak hours, it's charging the battery gradually throughout the day, except where it lines up where we have those peaks in our demand. And so it'll discharge and match that power to normalize that energy coming into the site throughout the day. You'll also notice right there above that 6 p.m., it flops. And so again, that's where the battery is powering the site and avoiding those peak demand charges, which then again takes us to that last section. So we get a nice even power supply to the site throughout the day, except for where we're paying those premium rates between 4 and 9 p.m. The last benefit is demand response premiums, and these get a little convoluted. But what it is the district has teamed with a third-party aggregator, Leapfrog Power. And what Leapfrog does is they go throughout the state and aggregate the storage as a whole. And then they will approach the CUPC when there's a threat of a brownout or, you know, maximum, the distribution system throughout the state is really being maximized. So they will auction off, the CUPC will auction off, like, we'll pay, you know, X amount for so much energy during these critical time periods. Leaf Frog Power will bid that, and then will, kind of like the PSPS events, they'll save up for that and fully discharge those batteries at those peak times. So in effect, it does not change our operations at all, but what it does is it takes our facilities off the grid during those peak times. So by taking our energy usage off, it's making that available to others, and they get a premium on that. And we'll cost share in that, and we're, I guess, the opposite of cost share. And the revenue that's generated in that's pretty minor amount, but expected to be about $18,000 annually on that. Again, just for an update on our projects, or moving on to the update in the projects, we've completed installations at 5 of our water treatment plants or pump stations. In total, that cost the district about $265,000 in site improvements. However, of those five sites, we're anticipating about $165,000 in annual savings. So within about 2 years, the first 2 years, we expect to have those costs fully recovered, and over the 20-year lifespan, cost savings in the amount of about $3.3 million. So this is one of the, probably our most challenging site that we installed at best at one of our water facilities. So this site has been somewhat neglected for a while. Really problematic for, because there's no fencing around it or whatnot. There's some illicit activity that has gone beyond there. We've had some complaints from some of our operators showing up and having people sleeping behind the building and whatnot. So again, not only do we get a cost savings, long-term cost savings, but it allows us a funding mechanism to secure the site, improve access to the site, and generally kind of do some general housekeeping at the site. Moving forward again, our next 2 projects are going to be at our 2 wastewater facilities, El Dorado Lift and Deer Creek. All of the projects moving forward require PG&E service modifications. That's part of the reason that they've been delayed to date. So you'll see at El Dorado Lift, it's about $7,000 to relocate our PG&E service out to, again, that switchgear that I showed in the very beginning, that big white box. And then another $25,000 in project management and construction inspection fees to complete that project. So that one's pretty straightforward. That funding will be accommodated under the discretion of the general manager, or already has been approved. The second larger project is at our Deer Creek wastewater treatment plant, and this involves a couple of upgrades. The first, you'll see construction improvements for $22,000. What that really entails is we are going to automate some of the breakers from our new solar facilities. So typically, again, during a power outage, if you're just connected to solar, your solar shuts off as soon as the power goes off because you can't backfeed into PG&E's lines. What this will allow us to do is it'll automate a portion of the field to go directly into the battery during those outages, so we can continue to generate and use that energy during an extended outage. The second, you'll see we've got $133,000 in there for a PG&E service upgrade. We're going to be relocating a transformer and our main switchgear outside of our blower building as part of these upgrades. What's not shown on the slide and not really kind of giving credit there is the switchgear at Deer Creek has been an ongoing safety issue for several years. It's older equipment. It doesn't have proper arc flash facilities. We did look at a project, I think about 3 years ago, to replace that switchgear, and the initial estimate came back at 2.1 million. So by working with Tesla to get to do this project and paying for $133,000 for our service upgrade, we avoid, you know, a long-term safety liability and fiscal liability for replacing that switchgear. Because it's a larger project, we also, again, have a $50,000 budget in there for capitalized labor for project management and inspection, and a contingency for $15,000. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. If you look to your handouts, I noticed an error in this. So previously, the PG&E service upgrade for the Deer Creek plant in the public agenda is listed with the same number as the El Dorado list for a $7,000 service upgrade. I noticed that was a substantial error, so I included that, or I fixed that in the presentation today. Next slide. So again, moving forward, we're hoping to begin the installation at El Dorado Lift in April, and following with Deer Creek in May or June. Total funding request revolving largely for that Deer Creek project is $221,000. Again, annual cost savings of about $110,000. So again, we're about at a 2-year payback period for making those improvements at those sites. And then that for the district long term, that again, that's us about 2.3 in cost savings over 20 years. The last site we have is again here at district headquarters, and again, this is also why we're breaking out between agenda items 13 and 14. So district headquarters is its own kind of a little bit of an animal. This site, when it was originally built, was built in 2 phases, the headquarters building and the annex portion behind it. And currently, during any power outages, only the annex portion is powered by generator. So this where we're sitting here today goes black. There's been a CIP in development for correcting that problem, putting an upsized generator, and the big problem, or the reason that's developed, is the generator that feeds the annex portion is backfed through the annex into our main service. With this project, we'll cut that off out here where the main service comes into the building, and relocate an enclosure out in this first gravel lot, which allows us to put a generator there, incorporate the battery package, and it also allows us easy access moving forward if we choose to move forward with a solar project, or eventually we'll likely be mandated to have EV charging for some of our fleet services. It'll give us an easy point of connection off of our service to move forward with that. The project in general is going to be constructed in 2 phases. Phase 1, again, is a partnership with Tesla. We are going to pre-purchase the generator and ATS during that same phase, and we'll hold on to those. It's about almost a year wait time on those two pieces of equipment. But so we're asking for $145,000 for generator pre-purchase the generator and the ATS, $75,000 for our share of trenching and site improvements that Tesla will be constructing as part of their initial build. We're going to relocate the PG&E service from inside our building out to the new enclosure, and then capitalize labor and contingency for a total funding request of $382,000. Phase 2, we will come back in and land that generator and ATS, and then because of the headquarters building is within the specific plan for the city, we're also required to match that with the aesthetics for the campus in general. So lion's share Phase 2 work will be constructing a 10-foot CMU wall to match the other walls around the district. And that portion of the work is out to bid currently, and we plan on bringing that bid to the next board meeting for approval. So we'll be moving forward with that, but it'll be a little bit more delayed. Next slide, please. So again, total cost for phase 1 and phase 2, we're anticipating just under $600,000. An annual cost savings of about $50,000 to the district. And this is the less favorable 11-year payback period based on those costs. It's important to note, though, because if we had not done a battery storage, that's a zero. You can't ever make that's a sunk cost. There's no payback period. We just put in a new generator to retrofit our building. So even though it's an extended payback period, it's costs that we're still going to recoup because of the incorporation of the peak shaving and whatnot from the battery storage. So in general, over the life of the project, we're anticipating about $600,000 in cost savings, which still, again, makes it worth our while. Again, this is just a summary of the funding request. So for item 13, we're asking for $221,000. That's going to come out of our wastewater funding. And then for item 14, it's going to be $382,000, and that'll come out of the general fund for the district. With that, again, because this is a little bit odd, we have two options for the board to consider.
Actually, we don't have two options. We have two items. So we'll consider action item number 13 first and call for public comment. Then we will consider action item number 14, and then we'll consider public comment. But we don't have to.
We're not going to vote out at the same time. But we have them both listed here. So for action item 13, we're recommending option 1, which is to approve payment to PG&E Electric in the not to exceed amount of $133,753 for electric relocation and rearrangement charges, and authorize additional funding in the amounts of $22,307 for construction, $50,000 for capitalized labor, and $15,000 for a project contingency, for a total funding request of $221,000 for the Tesla battery site improvements wastewater project. Option 2 is to take other action as directed by the board, and option 3 is to take no action.
I'll move option 1.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded by Director Dwyer and Director Osborne, seconded to approve item number 13, option 1.
I do have one question. What's the shelf life of these batteries? I mean, how often do they have to be replaced? Because I wouldn't assume they come cheap.
They don't. So right now, and they're brand new. So there's no proven track record on them. The estimates right now are about 20 years, and that's why we presented those numbers. The way that the incentives work is that we're committed to using the batteries for the first 10 years. And during that period, Tesla will provide complete O&M on them as well. So at the end of the 10 years, by that time, we should have a pretty good idea of where the batteries, how they're going to perform over that second 10 years. We can choose to liquidate them at that point, or hold them for the next 10, or depending on how rules and regulations change, maybe we supplement at that point at the same time. So we definitely have options as we move forward, and we'll want to really evaluate that come year 10.
All right, thanks.
Okay, any other questions from board members?
Director Day?
No, thank you.
All right. Director Bierkamp?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll recuse myself from the vote on these two items with a stock conflict.
Okay. Any comments from the public?
At this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 13. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote Division 1,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay. Item number 14, under consideration, option 1.
John will read the option 1 for action item number 14, just so everybody's clear.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, action item 14 is for the best equipment here at, or best installation here at headquarters. And option 1 is to award a contract to Bay City Electric in the not-to-exceed amount of $145,840 for the purchase of a diesel generator and automatic transfer switch, and authorize additional fundings in the amount of $75,000 for construction, $71,760 to PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric for relocation and rearrangement charges, $50,000 in capitalized labor, and $40,000 in project contingency, for a total funding request of $382,600 for the headquarters backup power modifications project. Option 2 is to take other action as directed by the board, and option 3 is to take no action.
Okay.
I'll move option 1.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded by,
For the record, Director Veerkamp has already stated that he is recusing himself from action item number 13 as well as action item number 14.
good reminder. Okay, there is a motion and a second to approve item number 14, option 1. Any other comments from board members?
Director Day?
No, thank you.
Okay, and comments from the public?
President Anzini, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 14. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote Division 1,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 15. We're back to Mr. Money,
Back again.
spending money.
Being as how this falls within the expenditure falls within the planned contingency, I move 1.
Okay, it's been a motion to
second that.
approve 1 and seconded by Director Day. Questions?
There are no questions, just this is a good news story, and there is, trying to find the summary, I mean, the pictures tell you the progress on this, and where is that change order? Oops. Where's the,
Jim?
are we going to go through, are we able to go through the entire slides, or? Okay,
That's fine.
okay, great.
You did a lot of work getting this up together, so, you know, we want to see it. Yes.
We'll start from here.
All right. So again, the reason for the board item today is to give a general update on the status of the project, and then again to ask for a change order for the construction management services out at the site. Right there, under the project status update, I kind of listed the major milestones that we've gone through to date. We successfully started all the pumps last Monday. We started the first pump. As of Wednesday, the station is running completely in auto. So that in itself is not very common. So Granite was allocating about 3 or 4 weeks for startup. So it really went smoothly. And again, I think just kind of emphasizes the project team that we had out there. Moving forward, testing will continue for about the next 10 weeks. It's just to prove the system as part of contractual requirements. Granite will be on site for probably about the next 4 weeks, doing final paving and cleanup. Actually, this week they are removing one of the B-side in-lake pumps. And I kind of wanted to point out, so during the course of construction, we actually had 3 pump failures on that B-side. So we picked the right time to replace those, replace that facility. So again, just kind of a general overview of the project. We started construction in February 24th of 2020. You will note that that was almost exactly a month before we all got sent home with COVID. So that again is I'll point that out, that we really had no delays for revolving around COVID. So really successful partnership, controlling, you know, the interaction of their crews, and really, I think we had 2 incidents where workers on site had, you know, come to COVID or whatnot, but because of their isolation or whatnot, it only affected their group and whatnot, and really helped us to keep things moving. As of the beginning of this month, we're about 93% complete on the project. I would say we're probably 95, 98% as of today. Just kind of going through the pictures again. So unlike other projects, we had to have a huge CIP just to build our CIP. You'll notice in that top right or top left slide, our in-water contractor spent about 4 months just building the platform so that we could mobilize the cranes and just get to the site before we could actually start construction. So the lower left shows I think about a week into once they were on site, we'd set up temporary pumps so that we could pump around and still make production during our construction season. And then right there on the lower left, we began with demo, and that's our first A-side pumps that we decommissioned. So those are the original pumps, and it's not a close-up there, but you can tell how deteriorated and those pumps were when we ended up pulling them. Go ahead, next slide, please. So once we were mobilized on site, work began on grading the slope so that we could accommodate the new intake facility or intake piping. So those are those first top 2 pictures. The bottom left is the anchor block that actually, one of the anchor blocks that secures the casings to the hillside or out of the water portion. The lower portions are all supported on piers, and you can see those in other pictures. But the other one I wanted to highlight is just the general complexity. So we basically replaced the entire electrical system for this facility, and you can kind of just tell by the spaghetti that's running there how many wires that were complete or had to be repulled as part of that construction. In addition to that, we had to tie into our main line the piping coming from those 4 new pumps. So that's 2 pictures of the 30-inch main coming up, as well as tying in a new surge tank on site to basically get us up to build-out conditions for the anticipated surge at the site. Just to give you some sense of scale, again, there's our current intake casings going up into the pipe or up into the actual pump station. That picture in the middle is one of our intake screens. So again, we have 3 of these intake screens so that we can select the temperature at which we're withdrawing from Folsom Lake. And that last picture just kind of shows you some scale on the discharge piping and manifolds that are coming out of the lake there. This is another significant improvement. So again, that top left is the last time we pulled one of our B-side pumps. And I think if you look up close on there, we had about 6 people that were wrestling with that pipe to get it in and out. They had to stage 3 pieces of equipment at different places in the on site to both pull the pipe and to unload the spools as they came out. Right below that shows the installation with the new overhead crane, and there's 3 guys there. There's 2 guys that are actually doing it and 1 guy that's supervising. So tremendous improvement on our safety practices and our ability to remove pumps in a timely manner. Trying to find somebody that's going to provide the equipment and work for us under that top situation has been challenging in the past. And again, this is the most recent picture I had for the presentation. The barge there has since been removed from the site. It's over at Granite Bay now being dismantled. But that's, in general, that's what we're going to be seeing for the next hopefully 50, 100 years. Is we've got our intake pipes going to the lake, overhead crane that's going to assist in pump removal and maintenance moving forward, and then the electrical equipment up and above that. So again, the change order that we were considering today was for our construction management services with Corollo. Originally, they had a 18-month schedule. That was anticipated construction duration for the project. That was delayed by about 10 months because of our in-water contractor really just had issues drilling the piers for that lower half of the system. So that really drug on. So initially, I think Corollo had a burn rate of, I think it was about 90 grand a month based on those numbers. They ended up really stretching that budget out. So we added 10 months on without coming back and asking for a change order. This additional 115 just gets us across the finishing line with the additional testing. And likely we won't use all that either. That was, again, we were anticipating up to about 4 weeks of testing that we accomplished in 3 days. So we should be able to continue to watch those costs. All in all, I think we're up to 68, I think, change orders to date for a total of about 1.5 million in change orders. In total, that's about, I think it's 4.5% of the project construction contract. So at the end of the day, we're expecting to be complete about 5% under budget, which again is, I think, a testimony of.
Government never does that.
Well, again, we've had a fantastic contractor and a fantastic CM team that's really helped us to tie up any loose ends. We did have 3 claims that were pending, and we've resolved all of those. So barring any really substantial surprises, we should be wrapping up about 5% under budget.
And there was an excellent project manager managing this. So
Thanks.
congratulations.
Been busy. And touching on funding again, just as kind of a follow-up, we did receive just over $7 million in grant fund or federal match funding from the Bureau as part of this project. We are pursuing an additional $602,000 based on, again, our contract change orders, actual cost of construction, and there was a little bit of a funding shortage on that initial 7. Whether or not that materializes is going to be a function of USBR budget and how we justify those additional costs. But we're hoping to bring in a little bit extra funding as well as we wrap this up.
So the overall cost minus the 42 million, minus that would be, it's about 36,000? I mean,
Not
36 million?
36,000, but
No, 36 million? Right.
yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers.
So
again,
for our residents who receive most of their water from Folsom, this is a benefit to them.
absolutely.
And water quality, is it going to be any better? That's what I'm going to be asked.
Water quality is well, so it actually does give us the ability to treat a little bit warmer water, which is
Okay.
a lot easier to treat and get better removal from. It also allows us to work as a partner with the Bureau and to maintain the cold water pool within Folsom Lake, which is, again, the lion's share of why we are receiving those matching funds from
Great.
matching federal funds.
All right.
So I think with that, we move on to the options. So again, option one is to approve a contract change order with Corolla Engineers in the not to exceed amount of $115,583 for additional construction management services for the Folsom Lake Intake Improvement Project. Option two is to
Well, and that's the option that is currently on the table, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Day.
All right, so I'll just
Yes.
stop there.
All right.
This is Director Day. I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah, John, back when, I may be mistaken, but didn't we talk at some point about painting the overhead, the crane, and maybe some of the ancillary equipment on site to try to help it blend in a little more, both visually from above, but also from the lake view? You know, whether it's olive green or brown or something.
We did, and so the color is a little bit more yellow in the slides than what is actually out there. The color we ended up selecting is called dusted olive. So it is an earth tone. What's out there is what the end color is going to be. We kind of went waffled back and forth. There's a separate surge tank out there that's green and really blends in well, but it's also right in front of a couple pine trees. The rest of the site, right now it kind of sticks out because everything's green, but the majority of the year, everything's going to be a little bit more drab, as things die off. And so that's why we selected the color that's actually out there.
Okay, yeah, it looks really yellow.
It does. It's got a little bit, again, it's not a yellow, it's not like a safety yellow. It is an earth tone, and that's the color that we ended up selecting. So I think during portions of the year, it might stick out a little bit more. Other portions of the year, it will, I think, blend a little bit better into the hillside.
Okay, so
All right, thank you.
is that all the questions, Director Day? Nope.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any comments from the public?
It does not appear at this time there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 15, option 1, moved by Director Osborne, seconded by Director Day. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote, Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. That concludes the action items on our agenda. We'll move to the review of assignments. Do any board members have any questions or ideas they want put on the list?
President Anzini, I'd like to address the board momentarily, if I could, before we go to review of assignments.
Okay.
And that is because I'd like for the minutes to reflect what I have to report out. Prior to the board's consideration of action items 13 and 14, Director Veerkamp indicated to me that he may have a disqualifying conflict of interest. That interest is characterized as a stock interest owned by his wife in the company Tesla. I directed him to recuse himself out of precaution, although after reviewing Government Code 1090, which precludes conflicts of interests, or it precludes participating in the making of a decision if one has a financial interest, I believe that Government Code Section 1091.5, which is a non-interest exemption from the otherwise requirement to disqualify, may apply in this particular instance. So I would just like for the minutes to reflect that the reason why Director Veerkamp disqualified himself, and I will go offline with Director Veerkamp to further analyze whether or not that non-interest category would apply and therefore allow him to participate in future decisions should they come up before the board again.
Much appreciation on that explanation. Thank you. Okay, review of assignments? Anything else? We will adjourn this meeting until April 11th for our special meeting.
Yes, I just wanted to call the board members' attention to our tentatively scheduled items. And as President Anzini stated, our special board meeting on Monday, April 11th at 1 p.m., where we will be considering the pension bonds.
Thank you. All right, meeting adjourned.